in the coming hours. Forecasters say some areas could see a storm surge of up to 11 feet and up to 16 inches of rainfall.
That's Fox's Rick Leventhal, who reports the National Weather Service is warning of potentially historic flooding. The storm had been expected to make landfall Monday, but is now slowed down and strengthened. A turn to the northeast late Tuesday expected to bring the eye of the storm ashore along the Mississippi-Alabama border about 24 hours from now. President Trump Monday touring some of the damage done by California wildfires, but respectfully disagreeing with the governor that climate change is the root cause of them.
Governor Newsom conceded lands could be better managed to help reduce wildfire danger, as the president insists, but asked him to respect the difference of opinion Californians have on climate change. The president awarded 7 California National Guard troops who rescued people who'd been trapped by flames earlier this month with the Distinguished Flying Cross.
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal. 24 people have died in the fires in California, another 10 dead in Oregon, where the smoke from the fires is so thick, some airlines have canceled flights into and out of the Portland International Airport. Shot in the head as they sat in a patrol vehicle Saturday, 2 L.A. County Sheriff's deputies continue to make progress toward their recovery, both now listed in stable condition. L.A. Sheriff Alex Villanueva says anti-cop sentiment from some groups has become dangerous.
I know there's a narrative that people are trying to push out that there's a George Floyd happening in every single department across the entire nation. That is absolutely false.
Sheriff Villanueva on Fox's Hannity. America is listening to Fox News.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? Do you wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
A new competitor to Amazon Prime now up and running.
More and more people have been subscribing to delivery services much like Amazon Prime, in which you can order things like groceries and other goods and get them delivered rather quickly. Walmart now offers Walmart Plus. It's a similar idea in which you pay yearly for membership and you get their products at an in-store price delivered same day, or when shopping in the store, you can scan your items yourself with your phone, pay with Walmart's own Pay app, and then just walk out the door. The service offers a free introductory period and discounts on Walmart and eventually Sam's Club branded gas. Eben Brown, Fox News.
The Attorney General of South Dakota under investigation for a fatal hit-skip accident. Jason Ravensborg says he called 911 Saturday when he thought he'd hit a deer on the roadway, and says when he returned to the crash site in the morning, discovered the body of a man he'd apparently struck. Ravensborg was headed home from a Republican Party dinner at the time and says he had not been drinking before the accident. Automakers Daimler AG and subsidiary Mercedes-Benz USA have agreed to pay $1.5 billion to the federal government and California state regulators to resolve emissions cheating allegations. The feds say Daimler violated environmental laws by using a certain type of software to get around emissions testing. Federal customs agents seizing a stash of bogus N95 face masks.
Customs and Border Protection agents seizing about 500,000 counterfeit N95 masks at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport in the midst of a nationwide shortage. The shipment was from China, which the feds say was headed to a company in New Jersey. 30 were sent to a testing facility where it was determined 10% of the respirators had a filter efficiency rating below 95%. Officials say those masks failed to meet CDC standards, putting the public at risk. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile Team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3 Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Off a day, this is Carl from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated team in Guam and on the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Pick up dinner for you and the family at Chili's. We got you covered with a variety of delicious family platter options, like our fajita trio, Cajun chicken pasta, or our crispy chicken crispers. Or order off our new menu for you and a friend and indulge in our tasty burgers, tacos, and ribs. Get your Chili's favorites in a way that works for you. Call 648-7377 or WhatsApp 929-7376 for curbside pickup orders. Or get delivery with Good to Go. Chili's, you can still savor the moments at home.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's the way the program starts every day. It started every day since the very beginning, the very genesis of Tall Tales, and will continue that way for a long, long time. Gives you a tip-off as to what the program is about: constitutional rights, individual freedom, conservatism, the Republicans versus the Democrats, local and international politics, etc. I'm going to start right out with Zemi Ikotny. And as usual, the Daily News does not have a local editorial. More boilerplate from Gannett News Service or USA Today. They're talking about saving the arts economy right now. I'm not going to spend any time with it. From there, straight to the Post. Quarantine issues must be rectified immediately. And this, of course, is the Post comment on a matter that we covered yesterday, entitled, let's see, Taimanao Azuzu versus the Department of Public Health and Secret Services. Here's how the editorial goes. We get that this is the first time the government of Guam has had to quarantine hundreds of people at any given time. At the same time, it's been more than 6 months that this quarantine process started. So we hope GovGuam will be quicker to rectify issues as they come up. We have heard from a number of people in quarantine that the issues they have encountered can take a toll on their well-being. But we have also heard that there are ways to correct the issues sooner. Here are some issues we hope can be fixed soon. Mental health. There are travelers who have gone into various states of depression. Let them quarantine at home under the condition public health keeps an eye on them with random checks. While that quarantine at home works for Jose and I, and for the real Joe Cruz, when we are deprived of the opportunity to do an episode of Tall Tales. Depression sets in. We just self-quarantine at home, right, Jose?
Separately, of course.
Of course, yes. And we work through it. Wrong quarantine site. There are civilians who have ended up in the Department of Defense designated facility. This is not good for the civilians and not good for the military that's fighting to keep the Wuhan virus from hampering It's 24/7 readiness. Travelers charge for costs. Quarantine travelers have been placed in hotels that are not GovGuam designated facilities. This means they're being billed for food and lodging while being held against their will. This is not right. Both GovGuam and the Department of Defense need to resolve this ASAP. One solution: travelers should be tested upon arrival. If they test negative, allow them to go home quarantine with a follow-up test several days later. This frees up government funds and personnel for more important tasks. Fairness. GovGuam representatives should do a better job of telling passengers what their rights are upon arrival. The court has said it's clearly, it's not voluntary quarantine if people don't have a choice but to be bused to a quarantine facility or risk getting fined and punished. Upon arrival, travelers, many of whom have had to endure nearly 24 hours of travel to get to Guam if they came from the States, should be clearly informed they have the right to petition the court to be allowed to quarantine at home. Our hope is that GovGuam learns to do better in the future. I think that perhaps the Post's wish will be fulfilled because I can't imagine the government of Guam doing a worse job at this quarantine. So there's only one way to go, and that's up. Okay, let's go from there to the card. And this is what I have in today's card. I have Stickman versus Lockdown. Or maybe I should pronounce it Stickman. You know what a Stickman is, Jose?
No. I know how to draw a stick man for the Hangman game.
That's it. That's
okay.
That's a stick man.
I know that stick man.
It's a drawing where the none of the people in the drawing have bodies. They're just a series of lines, right?
Oh, they are stick man?
They are stick. If you see one of those, they are a stick man. Yes. So the judge that ruled in that Pennsylvania case concerning a Pennsylvania version of the lockdown was Judge Stickman.
Ah.
Uh-huh. Or maybe the governor of Pennsylvania thought he was a stick man because he kind of stuck it to the governor of Pennsylvania. Yeah.
The stick man stuck my button.
There you go. So I've got Stickman versus Lockdown. I've got the quarterbacks versus Lou. Anumita Carr and Kalani Regis versus the United States Marine Corps. Julian Uggan versus capitalism. Michael San Nicolas versus the separatists. Jama Manglotnia versus the people of Guam. And Hawaii versus Gods and Arrows. And, of course, I always start out with Tina. Tina is up to 22 days now without having, well, wait a minute. I think she did it today. Yeah. So she's back to zero. She called the legislature into emergency session today. She's back to zero to override the governor's veto.
I appreciate this one.
The overriding the governor's veto?
The reason the call and the override.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you appreciate the special session. Okay. So let's see. Starting out with Stickman, and there's an article here that I picked up from the Federalist. Federal judge says Pennsylvania Democrat governor's lockdown orders are unconstitutional. Now, I chatted with Ray on the radio on his show this morning, and this article, like most of the articles you see, will dwell on the shiny objects of the decision. And, you know, so many people only read the headlines and think, oh, okay, lockdowns are unconstitutional. End of story. Full stop, right? And that isn't exactly what Judge Stickman said. But, you know, so often when it comes to judicial decisions, people want to know, well, who won? And that's the end of the analysis. And if the right person won, oh, good, the court did the right thing. If the wrong person went, hell, those darn courts. So I'll spend a little time with this article, and then I'll go to the decision. The decision is 66 pages long, and I waded through the whole thing this morning. The lawsuit, brought by Butler, Fayette, Greene, and Washington counties, joined by Pittsburgh area Republican Congressman Mike Kelly and several state representatives, was filed in May, arguing Governor Tim, and notice that, it was filed in May, and the decision is coming down in the middle of September. Was filed in May, arguing Governor Tim Wolf's orders implemented with State Health Secretary Rachel Levine to shut down businesses, violated constitutional liberties. 7 businesses that included several hair salons and appliance store had also joined the suit. Because a hair salon was involved, Nancy Pelosi filed a motion to intervene. Yeah, Nancy Pelosi knows the law on hair salons by heart. And here's a question. Does a governor, any governor, our governor, Wisconsin's governor, whomever, do they have the authority through the Constitution to shut down the economy the way they did or force closures of any businesses? Washington County Commissioner Nick Sherman told a Pittsburgh CBS affiliate in July. So Nick Sherman got some good earned media out of this. In a 66-page ruling, U.S. District Court Judge for Western District of Pennsylvania, William Stickman, struck down Wolf's limits on indoor and outdoor gatherings of up to 25 to 250 people. The limitations, Stickman wrote, violate the right of assembly enshrined in the First Amendment. Stickman ruled that the governor's stay-home order and mandatory closure of businesses, which were deemed non-essential to curb the spread of the virus, infringed on citizens' freedoms and discriminated based upon arbitrary life-sustaining and non-life-sustaining standards, breaching 14th Amendment protections. In the ruling, Stickman said he believes that the defendants undertook their actions in a well-intentioned effort to protect Pennsylvanians from the virus. Well, that's the most important thing. They had good intentions. Our governor has really good intentions. You know, her heart is in the right place, so everything is fine. Stickman emphasized that once liberties erode under a public emergency, they become difficult to repossess. Even a vigilant public may let down its guard over constitutional liberties, only to find that liberties once relinquished are hard to recoup, Stickman wrote. Wolf's office, the governor's office, said they're reviewing the decision. So I'm not going to go into the whole decision chapter and verse, but I'll share with you what I think some of the highlights are. Yeah. The decision starts out, the Wuhan virus, and again, they don't use the correct terminology. The Judge Stickman is talking about a Wuhan, as your COVID-19 pandemic. So with all due respect to the judge, I'm going to correct his vocabulary where necessary. The Wuhan virus pandemic has impacted every aspect of American life. Since the Wuhan virus emerged in late 2019, governments throughout the world have grappled with how they can intervene in a manner that is effective to protect their citizens from getting sick, and specifically how they can protect their healthcare systems from being overwhelmed by an onslaught of cases. In this country, founded on a tradition of liberty enshrined in our Constitution, governors, and courts have grappled with how to balance legitimate authority of public officials in a health emergency with constitutional rights of citizens. That's something that Ray and I talked about this morning. Those rights in the Bill of Rights are not absolute. There is a balancing test required between the effect of the constitutional amendments and what we might label the public interest. In this case, the court is required to examine some of the measures taken by the defendants. The measures at issue are: 1, the restrictions on gatherings; 2, the orders closing non-life-sustaining businesses and directing Pennsylvanians to stay at home. Non-life-sustaining businesses is the functional equivalent of non-essential businesses for our situation. And life-sustaining businesses, so you could just translate non-life-sustaining means non-essential. And the judge comes down really hard on these things, and the quick and dirty explanation is that if the facts of our particular situation were before Judge Stickman, he would rule against our governor. Yeah, that's the way it would go, and he explains it pretty clearly as to why. So first was the restrictions on gathering, and second, orders closing non-life-sustaining businesses and directing Pennsylvanians to stay at home. Have we been directed to stay at home?
I believe so.
Absolutely, and there were even checkpoints out on the road that started out with the idea to ask people where they were going.
I think the term was roadblocks.
Yeah. Yeah, because the governor decided she couldn't have checkpoints.
Checkpoints are illegal, so they were called roadblocks.
And made all the difference in the world. After reviewing the record in this case, including numerous exhibits and witness testimony, the court believes the defendants undertook their actions in a well-intentioned effort to protect Pennsylvanians from the virus. However, good intentions toward a laudable end are not enough to uphold government action against a constitutional challenge. You got to have more than good intentions and a worthwhile end. Indeed, the greatest threats to our system of constitutional liberties may arise when the ends are laudable and the intent is good, especially in a time of emergency. This action seeks a declaration that defendants' actions violated and continue to violate the First Amendment, as well as both the due process and equal protection clauses of the 14th Amendment. Specifically, plaintiffs argue that numeric limitations on the size of gatherings violate the First Amendment. In other words, saying that a grouping of 25 is okay, 26 is wrong, violates that section of the First Amendment, which I just happen to have right here. And what it says is Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. And there's no mention of any numbers in there.
Is there a mention of unless there's a pandemic?
No, the word pandemic does not appear anywhere in the United States. It's like privacy. Everybody knows it's there, but nobody can find it, right? So I think a really important thing to mention here is the Jacobson case, Jacobson versus Massachusetts, which is something else that Ray has talked about and he and I talked about this morning. Jacobson versus Massachusetts is a 1905 Supreme Court case, and the Jacobson case holds that local government officials have broad authority to deal with contagion, quarantines, and such things. And that has been kind of the, not the leading case, but the lamppost by which others have guided themselves. So the first question that Judge Stickman has to answer is, what standard of review should he use in dealing with these restrictions? And of course, the defendants say, well, you know, under Jacobson, you have to give us broad discretion. You know, so unless something is really clearly unconstitutional, you kind of got to let it go. And that's not what the court said. This is what Judge Stickman said. The court will apply, quote, regular constitutional scrutiny to the issues in this case. Two considerations inform this decision: the ongoing and open-ended nature of the restrictions and the need for an independent judiciary to serve as a check on the exercise of emergency government power. So what the judge is saying here, you can't come in here, Governor of Massachusetts, and say, well, yeah, we did all of these things, and the reason was Jacobson versus Massachusetts, which gives us all kinds of authority like that. That won't work. And in more than one place in the decision, the judge points out that there's no end to the things that the governor of Massachusetts is doing. The governor of Massachusetts, the judge suggests that had the governor of Massachusetts said, we're going to put these measures in place for the next 14 days and then they'll be over, his reasoning would have been different. But the governor of Massachusetts, sort of like the governor of Guam, has led people to believe that this will go on forever. I didn't pronounce that correctly. That this will go on forever.
A couple more evers behind.
Yeah. So that's an important aspect of this case. So at least one U.S. district court has held that Jacobson is an interesting but not controlling case in dealing with these kinds of issues. Let me see here. I got some other pretty good stuff here. Yeah, I've got the conclusion. The court closes this opinion as it began by recognizing that defendants' actions at issue were undertaken with good intention of addressing a public health emergency. But even in an emergency, the authority of government is not unfettered. The liberties protected by the Constitution are not fair weather freedoms in place when times are good, but able to be cast aside in times of trouble. There is no question that this country has faced and will face emergencies of every sort, but the solution to a national crisis can never be permitted to supersede the commitment to individual liberty that stands as the foundation of the American system, individual liberty. A Constitution cannot accept the concept of, quote, new normal, where the basic liberties of the people can be subordinated to open-ended emergency mitigation measures. Rather, the Constitution sets certain lines that may not be crossed even in an emergency. Actions taken by defendants cross those lines. And let me talk a little bit about that. One of the things that the judge came down on was this idea of, what was the terms I used that are the same as are essential and non-essential? Yeah, well, I'm just going to use essential and non-essential. The terms that the judge used were different, sort of like life-preserving and non-life-preserving. But the way they did it in Massachusetts, deciding between essential and non-essential, they had this group of advisors who met The governor never met with them. They didn't keep minutes or any notes or anything like that. And their decision process was sort of, well, you know, it's just common sense. But there was no rationale at all behind what they determined was essential and non-essential, which is exactly what we have here. So using the ruling in the County of Butler versus Thomas Wolfe, most of these restrictions would fall. Kmart can sell you shampoo, but they can't sell you a pair of trousers, these kinds of things, because there's no rational basis behind it.
Need Zoris.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a break, and after the break, I'll come back to Dr. Tom Poole.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch! That's just what we did with our new state-of-the-art mobile banking app as we celebrate 66 years of serving our island communities. It's loaded with a ton of new user-friendly features, including remote deposit capture. It's another way of saying you don't have to come to the bank to go to the bank. And if you want to come to the bank, we're happy to see your smiling face as long as you wear a mask. And we don't have long lines. Bank Pacific Rosebud branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Time is running out. The last day to respond to the 2020 Census of Guam is fast approaching. Call 645-2020 to respond before September 30. Our call center hours are Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. This is your chance to influence the decisions made for the next 10 years. Don't get left out of the count. Together, we can make a difference.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Doing real estate since 1978. 14 years here on Guam. Call Maria Miller from Horizon Properties at 777-7792.
And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are back again, Tall Tales, and I have the esteemed Dr. Tom Poole on the line. Good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon, Judge. Thank you. I just, listening to you go through that decision, and I read it myself, and I find myself... I'm just completely infatuated with Judge Stickman. I think I want to have his baby. And I just want to know, is there any way that you would improve on his decision? Is there anything that you would change about it if you could?
No, I think he covered all the bases and in a clear, easily understood fashion. He got the message across.
I thought so too. I just thought it was thorough, and I just thought it was great. It's just very encouraging to me. Good, thanks, Judge. I just wanted to know, if you had any way of improving it, and I'm relieved that you don't.
Well, ordinarily, it doesn't matter whose work product it is. Being the host of Tall Tales and all, I would figure out some way to improve on it. But...
I expected that. Right. Okay. Thank you, Judge. Thanks very much.
Okay, Dr. Poole. Yeah. I'll give Judge Stickman a pass here on this one. So, of course, people read it. People have read about it. People have heard about it. People think, wow, that's good news. People like the decision, like Dr. Poole. And then I think the next question is, but what does that mean for us here on Guam? And the answer is not much. As I explained this morning, we have 93 districts, each of which has a district court in the United States, and each of which has at least one district court judge. Some have many more than that. And they are parallel, one with the other. So if the court in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, which would be Philadelphia, decides a case one way, and the district court in the Western District of Pennsylvania, which would be Pittsburgh, decides it exactly the opposite, That's showbiz, because they're parallel courts. So our district court is a parallel court to the district court in the Western District of Pennsylvania. So what that court decided has no direct bearing on our district court at all. That doesn't mean that what Judge Stickman wrote won't be useful, because you could bet that there are plenty of lawyers on Guam right now who have read that decision and have said, oh, okay. Now, here's a little secret about lawyers. Lawyers never do original work if they can copy somebody else's. So a lawyer would look through that and think, yeah, the fact situation here is so close to our own, the parallels, the essential and the non-essential. And a gathering of 25 is okay, but 26 isn't. All of these things, that I could advance the arguments that convinced Judge Stickman in my own case. So, there are ways that lawyers can have access to the memoranda filed before Judge Stickman, et cetera. So this could be a real assistance to counsel on Guam that want to take on our own lockdown situation, and I hope somebody does. Are you listening, Rachel Taimanao Azuzu? This looks like a good case for you to sink your teeth into, like you did with the quarantine cases. So in a rational world, counsel for the governor would be reading this case and would be saying,
That sounds like the judge is micromanaging.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so, like the Attorney General said, yeah. So, counsel for the governor ought to take a look at this as though it were a primer as to how not to do it. And the things that where we're in violation ought to be brought to a stop. A classic example here is one construction barracks of 74 people, had several cases of Wuhan virus. So what is the remedy? The remedy is off with their heads. Close down the entire construction industry. And one of the principles involved in these restrictions is that they have to be narrowly tailored to attain a worthwhile state objective. Well, there's nothing narrowly tailored about shutting down a whole industry because there was a high incidence of positive in one barracks. So I think a lawyer or a couple of lawyers could have a lot of fun with our particular quarantine regulations. So Judge Stickman.
I've heard that the restriction has been lifted now on construction work.
I think probably
I'm trying to find where I saw that at.
Yeah. I suspect that the pressure got to be unbearable. When Tall Tales and the Post both come down on them, that's pretty hard to hang on to something like that. After that. Okay, and then, of course, I've got our Carl on the line, the most dangerous man in the room. Our Carl, did you just fly in from Pittsburgh?
I can't tell you.
Oh.
It's a secret.
All right.
Now he's being coy.
Yeah. You know what happens if I tell you where I came from, right?
You'd have to kill me.
Or at least badly injure you, and I wouldn't want to do that.
All right, thank you, Carl.
Yeah, I just wanted to inject a thought, and I'm assuming that both of the local newspapers are, someone from their offices listen to your show regularly. I'm hoping that one of the newspapers, or maybe both, instead of just passively accepting the figures as far as these deaths from the virus, that they would dig in and, I'd like to see some kind of a table or something showing what the comorbidities were for these people, and some of the details. The CDC, as you know, it wasn't that long ago, it was just, I think, a week or two ago, they announced that of the over 170,000 some people that were supposed to have passed from this Wuhan virus, that only 6% died just with the virus, no other comorbidities.
And the CDC even now uses the Andrew Camacho test.
Oh, yeah. The famous Andrew Camacho test.
Yeah.
Yes. As long as the nostrils survive.
As long as there's a nostril.
They're good to go.
Yeah, as long as there's a nostril to stick that probe into, that's all you need.
Exactly. And I've heard that, there's a government incentive to classify as many deaths as possible as caused by this Wuhan virus, regardless if it was the main cause.
Yeah, I saw a breakdown on that, and then there's extra money for people put on ventilators, and there's definitely an economic dimension to it.
Yeah, and people are, when you incentivize certain things, you get more of it. I mean, there's just, as you've said, if you want to get less of something, tax it. If you want to get more of something, subsidize it. And that, to me, is what we see here, is the figures have just become corrupted because of this incentive that's been inserted by the government to frame as many deaths as possible as caused by the virus. There's a difference between dying with the virus and dying of the virus, and the CDC's admission really throws into suspicion about 94% of those deaths. How many were actually caused by the virus, and how many were actually killed by other things, like a heart attack, like we've seen here, or other things. And this latest case, sad to see, about this young child that passed. If I lost a child when any of my 4 kids were young, I would be devastated. But as a parent, I would want to meet with the attending physician, and I would demand to know, how did this happen? Because statistically, children comprise a small fraction of the deaths from this tiny fraction. And I'd want to know what happened that this, my child defied the statistics. There's got to be some reason behind that. It can't be just, by magic. So I'd be like David Lebowski, and I would pursue that like a pit bull, and I wouldn't stop until I found out what went on.
Carl, given your reputation, I don't think you'd have to pursue it very hard. The most dangerous man in the room.
We are dealing with government, so who knows?
That's true.
They might not feel intimidated by the most dangerous man. Anyway, Bob, just one other thing. It came to mind when you were talking that, there's always this pat phrase that's given out. We're all in this together, and I used to imagine that as being that some of us are in the on the Titanic in the luxury suites, and some of us are in the cargo hold. The people that have been found unworthy to work.
Steerage.
Yeah. But I thought of an even better visual image. Many years ago, I saw Titanic, and I can remember the scene of these people out in the frigid water, and some people on the boats. So the people on the boats these these boats meant to save people from not having to go in the water. Of course, they're safe and comfortable, and so we want to get up in the boat to be like you guys. We want to take care of our families, and so we try to get up on the boat, and no, you're selfish. That you can't do that. That's selfish. We just want to be where you guys are. We just want to support our families, support ourselves. Pay for our rent. These bills are not stopping. They keep pouring in. They keep rolling in. They're crushing us. So I thought that was a pretty good visual image, that the administration, the legislature has created two classes of workers, some in the lifeboats and some in the frigid waters. And all we want is out of the frigid waters, and we want to be where everyone else is so we can take care of ourselves and our families. Anyway, Bob, thanks for allowing me to chime in. I appreciate it.
Okay, our Carl. That's our Carl, the most dangerous man in the room. Okay, so we'll put the stick man away, and next item on the card is quarterbacks versus Lou. And this relates to the lawmakers have narrowly voted to reject the governor's budget bill for fiscal 2021, which proposed to increase adopted revenues by $7 million. The bill failed with 8 votes against and 6 in favor. Talina Nelson, who has been called to active duty, was excused. Senators who voted in favor of the governor's budget version were Regine Bisco-Lee, Speaker Tina Barnes, Clayton Rogel, Amanda Shelton, Jose Trelawney, and Mary Torres. The legislature has about 2 weeks to come up with 10 votes needed to override the governor's rejection of the $950 million budget proposal, which they did today and which I'll be discussing tomorrow. So let's talk about the vote on the bill that the governor vetoed the legislature's bill. The governor sent over her own bill, and 6 voted in favor of it, 8 voted against. But once again, we had quarterbacks come out. Now, quarterback is someone who is seated in the legislative body, and when the roll is called, votes are taken by roll call. Instead of voting, a senator would say, pass.
We got that list?
I've got the list. So, a senator can vote yay or nay or pass. And some do it repeatedly, and it puts the legislature in such a horrible light. People who are new to the process and watch come away with the idea, they've been talking about this budget for months, and now when it comes to a vote, Will Castro doesn't know how he wants to vote? So he's going to pass? In fact, pass twice? How stupid can you be? Are we back to Myers-Briggs again with senators passing? But those who have a little understanding of the chicanery of the game know that it's a strategic undertaking so that senators can be on the right side of the vote when the votes are counted, and I'll tell you what I mean by the right side, but are able to protect their own interests at the same time. The best example that I could give you would be that all of the efforts to override the salary increases put in place by the Juan Pat 10, when senators in the 32nd Guam legislature gave themselves $25,000 per year raises retroactive for almost 2 years. And in the 33rd Guam legislature, Mike San Nicolas led the charge to roll back those raises. Mike San Nicolas and 4 others that I referred to as the San Nicolas posse. So these votes were put together in a lot of different ways, usually with a poison pill. And senators, for instance, Judy Wampat, whose name starts with a W, so she gets to vote last, would pass until they saw that the bill to roll back did not have enough votes to become law, and then instead of passing, they'd vote aye, they'd vote in favor, thereby keeping the money and having bragging rights. I voted to roll back my own salary. And when it was all over, I think every senator had figured out a way to keep the money and vote to roll salaries back. So that's why this is so pernicious. So this time now, there are only 14 members in the hall because Talina Nelson's on National Guard duty. So in order for the bill to pass, for the bill not to pass, you only need to have 7 votes. As soon as there are 7 noes, that bill is not going to pass. So Castro passed the first time around. Regine Bisco-Lee passed, but ultimately voted yes. And I can't help but speculate, Regine Bisco-Lee did not run for re-election. I just wonder if there's a possibility that she might wind up in the Leon Guerrero administration in January. I don't know. I haven't even looked in my crystal ball, but I can't help but wonder. Then we come down the list. So Castro passed. Lee voted yes. Marsh, Moylan, and Munya voted no. That's 3. Paris voted no. That's 4. San Augustine voted no. That's 5. Shelton passes. 5 noes. She passes. Taitagui, 6. Terlahi passes. He wonders, is that 7 no coming? And then Therese Terlahi, no. So that's 7 noes. The bill cannot pass. What does Mary Torres do? She passes. She passes twice. It's just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's confusing.
Really? Is it confusing or is she confused?
Yeah.
Gosh. I understand why senators want to do this. I abhor the practice. But there's no sense passing when you know the bill is going to fail. And then she did vote in favor when she got around to voting and she saw that it wasn't going to pass. She voted yes. And the second time around,
wait, if she knew it wasn't going to pass,
yeah,
she voted yes.
Yeah,
to protect something.
Yeah. Well, she didn't want to make the governor angry. Governor, I'm sorry, I voted in favor of your bill. I passed twice, but yeah, I voted in favor of your bill.
Sounds like a game of hot potato.
Really. And yeah, and it's just really, and then Castro the second time around passed again. So I don't understand the thought process involved there. Okay, let's take a short break.
The last day to respond to the 2020 Census of Guam is fast approaching. Respond by September 30, 2020 to help our island receive the federal funding it needs for essential services. We only receive this chance every 10 years. Don't get left out of the count. Contact the call center at 645-2020 to complete your interview today. Together, we can make a difference.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumont, or call 646-1463.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mezcla. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro and Mezcla Dos are open for takeout and delivery services. More details, call the Hagåtña location at 479-2652 or Mezcla Dos Upper Tumont at 646-6295. Get your Mezcla fix at the comfort of your home.
So on the subject of passing here, on the bill to cancel the primary, we had a couple of quarterbacks then. Senator Raging Lee passed twice, and Senator Kelly Marsh Titano passed also. And I wrote a letter to all of them that got published in the paper. And I submitted statutory language that would bring an end to this corrupt practice. And it's really very simple. You make just a couple of changes. First of all, the roll call would be done in not in alphabetical, but in random order. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when the names are called, you don't know when your name is going to be called. So the roll would be called in random order, and then the only votes that would be recognized would be yay or nay. And if a senator sat in his chair and didn't say boo, that would be a nay. And we could put all of this passing stuff behind it. That'd be a real favor for Mary Torres, because she wouldn't look so dense by passing twice and then voting yes after the bill had failed. So that hasn't gone anywhere, and anybody who is a challenger, anybody running for senator, this is the kind of thing that would get you high marks on Tall Tales, reforming the process so that there isn't the kind of room for this kind of chicanery. And this is only one example of some of the tricks that go on in there and that have been tolerated for a long, long time and are definitely not in the public interest. So if you are a challenger, that's something you might pick up on. Okay, next item on the card is Anamita Carr and Kalani Rages versus the USMC. I'll come back to that right after the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam. 93.3 FM, and 104.3 HD3.
Here comes Sally. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Still several hours away from landfall, Hurricane Sally is beginning to be felt along the Gulf Coast, winds battering the shoreline of Alabama. That's what it sounds like on Dauphin Island, a narrow strip of land at the mouth of Mobile Bay. They're reporting sand and seawater already covering some of the roadways. Most of the locals, including Sharon Dixon, leaving.
I'm not going to hang around if it's coming right to us.
Not expected to make landfall until late tonight or early Wednesday, Sally could soon spawn tornadoes along the Gulf Coast.
Sometime by early today, some of the storms that would have the potential to produce tornadoes will brush the coast of the Florida Panhandle and perhaps southern Alabama.
Meteorologist Rich Thompson at the National Weather Service says Sally is expected to make landfall as a Category 2 hurricane near the border of Alabama and Mississippi. Hurricane Paulette has knocked down trees and power lines across Bermuda on Monday. It's a rare landfall for that island. So far, no reports of serious property damage. Paulette is now headed out to the mid-Atlantic. Los Angeles County Sheriff Villanueva says a false narrative is costing law enforcement lives.
We got to go by facts and not by emotion. It's really easy to manipulate emotion. It's kind of hard to manipulate facts. In this nation, average once a week, there's a cop killed in the line of duty by the felony actions of a suspect. Once a week.
Sheriff Alex Villanueva telling Fox's Hannity some celebrities and some politicians are fanning the flames of hatred by suggesting police officers are intentionally killing black suspects. The search for the person who shot the sheriff's deputies in the head Saturday continues, but both deputies are now listed in stable condition. After an up day on Wall Street Monday, Asian stock markets are closing Tuesday mixed. Dow futures are trading about 130 points higher. America is listening to Fox News.
Have you responded to the 2020 Census of Guam? If not, time is running out. Call 645-2020 before September 30 to make sure you and your family are counted in the 2020 census. Our call center hours are Monday to Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., and Sunday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. We only get this chance every 10 years. Don't get left out of the count. Together, we can make a difference.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña and Mezcla Dos Upper Tumon are now open for takeout and delivery services. For more information, call now at 479-2652 or 3 or Mezcla Dos at 646-6295. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro brings you island hospitality with the true taste of modern Chamorro cuisine at the comfort of your own home. They take your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair you will only find at Mezcla. Mezcla, a true taste of Guam.
President Trump will preside over an historic signing ceremony at the White House today as another Arab state makes peace with Israel.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the United Arab Emirates Foreign Minister will sign the peace deal at the White House, normalizing relations between the two countries. The treaty between the UAE and Israel was followed by one between Bahrain and Israel, which was announced Friday. Administration officials tell Fox News that Oman, Sudan, and perhaps even Saudi Arabia may follow, and soon. Hungary's foreign minister will be the only EU diplomatic leader to attend today's signing ceremony. Many European powers like France and the UK welcome the Israel-UAE deal, which said it was good for regional stability. In Washington, John Decker, Fox News.
Meanwhile, the president is putting Iran on notice after reports surfaced that Tehran is plotting the assassination of an American diplomat.
Multiple sources tell Fox News the plot against U.S. Ambassador Lana Marks is just one of several Tehran is considering in retaliation against the U.S. for the January killing of Iran's top general Qasem Soleimani. President Trump responding on Twitter, tweeting, any attack by Iran in any form against the United States will be met with an attack on Iran that will be 1,000 times greater in magnitude. Iran denies the claims, but Fox News has learned the reason intel agencies are taking this threat seriously is because while Iran has made similar plots in the past, they believe this time they could actually have the capability to carry it out. In Washington, Sean Langell, Fox News.
Scientists at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine say they've isolated the smallest biological molecule that completely and specifically neutralizes the root of the coronavirus. It's been shown to be highly effective in preventing and treating infections in mice and hamsters during lab tests. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Coffee Day. This is Claire Manglona from Security Title with an important warning. Wire fraud is real, and home buyers and sellers are one of the biggest targets, even on Guam. When sending money by wire transfer, be sure to confirm the wire instructions by phone, not email. In this case, it's good to be suspicious and know who you're dealing with. Let the professionals at Security Title work with you to minimize loss due to wire fraud. We are here to help.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumon or call 646-1463.
The last day to respond to the 2020 Census of Guam is fast approaching. Respond by September 30, 2020 to help our island receive the federal funding it needs for essential services. We only receive this chance every 10 years. Don't get left out of the count. Contact the call center at 645-2020 to complete your interview today. Together, we can make a difference.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
Well, you just saw it again. The envy of the National Football League, one of the greatest halftime shows in North America, right here in Tall Tales every afternoon at 1700. So we're now into the second half of Tall Tales, and the next item on my card is Anamita Carr and Kalani Rages versus the USMC. Anamita Carr is a reporter for the Pacific Daily News. I'm not sure that I know who Kalani Rages is, except that I know that Kalani Rages in June participated in a demonstration held in solidarity with mainland protests. Read Black Lives Matter. And here's that June 2 article. Less than 24 hours after its announcement on social media, more than 100 people gathered at the ITC intersection Monday to stand in solidarity with stateside protests demanding the end of police brutality and racial justice. Kalani Rages says she organized the event. Less than 24 hours after it broke, she organized the event. I wonder if she's part of the network. Because she cared and wanted to spread awareness about Black Lives Matter. You lift everybody. Black rights are human rights. Black lives are human lives. And it's just so sad that some people don't see that. They think they have to be worthy, but other than being born, that's your only qualification to be worthy of rights in this day and age. Rages stated. So her latest media venture is in an article that ran in the Daily News this morning. Valiant Shield began this week. Critics say public kept in the dark on military Wuhan virus. The military began its 11,000-person Valiant Shield exercise on Guam and around the region this week. Governor Leon Guerrero assured that the training can be done safely during the Wuhan virus pandemic. Guam's virus case count has remained high for weeks, and the island has been under pandemic condition of readiness, as it were, POS 1 since August 21. Several service members participating in the exercise will be housed off base, and so on. According to the Guam Visitors Bureau Board of Directors, about 1,000 Valiant Shield participants will be in local hotels. Due to our operational security concerns, we can't discuss how many service members are staying in local hotels or in which hotels they're currently residing. Valiant Shield participants include the USS Ronald Reagan, USS America, USS New Orleans, USS Germantown, and multiple surface ships, approximately 100 aircraft, and an estimated 11,000 personnel from the Navy, Air Force, Army, and Marine Corps. In support of exercise events, service members will only be permitted to travel between their designated hotel room and their appointed place of military duty on base. This restriction will be strictly enforced. I got my pages kind of screwed up here. The health and safety of both local communities as well as service members involved in the exercise. All government of Guam pandemic conditions of readiness and executive order guidelines apply, and any service member suspected to be in violation will be investigated and held accountable if appropriate. Now, that's what the exercise is all about. It's an 11,000 man, where man means both members of both, or excuse me, all sexes. So that's what the story's about. But then we get this. Some residents are still concerned. Some residents are still concerned, citing a lack of transparency. Quote, "My concern is not with the service members themselves, but with our government and Joint Region Marianas, specifically in that they failed to adequately let the Guam public know ahead of time that Valiant Shield would be happening," said Kalani Regis, adding that notices came out just this week. Now, who is Kalani Regis? A friend of Anamita Carr? So she goes on to say, "I felt like people were moving into lease your apartment before the landlord tells you that your lease was up. You have no choice but to comply, but it feels like a betrayal of trust. GovGuam specifically has not addressed it adequately. This is not the first time the public is being kept in the dark regarding the military or Wuhan virus," Regis said. I want answers to basic questions, like what hotels these 11,000 people will be staying at, and what measures are taken to keep public interaction low. I want to know what they do with those who tested positive to reassure the public that what has transpired on Guam recently, when those airmen went cavorting about Tuman, spreading Wuhan, will not happen again. So Kalani Regis is demanding to know. Yeah. So that's it. Kalani Regis. The story is about
some people.
Yeah, some people. Valiant Shield began this week. Critics say public kept in the dark on military COVID.
Some
critics.
people and critics.
Critics. One person, Kalani Regis. So the story is about Kalani Regis and, of course, grievance politics. And I don't know. I haven't seen her name connected with the separatists, but it fits the profile. That this reporter gives that much earned media to someone who is just coming in with some grievance politics that really is only tangentially related to the story.
Wouldn't that be better if they say a person, a critic?
Well, if you said a critic, if you said Kalani Regis, the general reaction would be ho hum. I'm really concerned about Kalani Regis and her demands. Who is Kalani Regis? So I just see it as Anamita Carr helping somebody out to get some earned media on some grievance politics. And it isn't the first time that I've detected that. This is perhaps a little bit more blatant than normally. Okay, kind of staying with the same thing here, grievance politics, separatists, etc. I've got an article here that I've had for a little while. Guam lawyer speaks on environment during New York Times virtual forum. International rights lawyer Julian Uggen. You remember Julian Uggen? Julian Uggen is one of the lawyers that participated in the Davis case, has always identified with the separatist cause. International rights lawyer Julian Uggen of the Guam-based Blue Ocean law firm joined a worldwide virtual discussion titled, quote, "Should Capitalism Survive Climate Change?" Yeah. I'm sure that Julian Uggen was a champion of capitalism. That's why they picked him. They wanted to have some balance there. Now, this is the same Julian Uggen that I mentioned earlier when somebody sent me a copy of a screen capture from his Facebook page where he said, quote, "Immensely grateful for journalists like Sarah Solie and the team at The Guardian for shining a light on the work of Blue Ocean Law," that's his company, "and others to arrest the spreading canopy of militarization wreaking havoc in Guam and around the world. Our team is proud to stand with Protehi Latexan and ready to dig deep for and with others," here's the key part, "to rip the old world order up by the roots and plant new things." Rip the old world order up by the roots. And he has also been chosen to participate in a discussion called "Should Capitalism Survive Climate Change?" Yeah. This is something that's caught my attention. I'm going to see if I can observe counsel in these matters from now on.
I recall it's kind of a step up from local water reservoirs to blue oceans.
Yeah.
Remember, he was an advocate for free water for everybody at one time.
I know that he was dead set against selling the water authority, but I didn't know he was for free water for everybody, huh?
Or at least for native Chamorros, something like that.
Yeah, well, of course. It's, who owns the island, after all? Who owns the water, right?
Yeah.
Okay, next item on the card is kind of sticking with the same theme. This is Michael San Nicolas versus the Separatists. And this ran in the Post quite a while ago. It was a workup on all the candidates. And the ones that I paid the most attention to were for the Washington Rep Post. So I'm going to start out with Will Castro. Let's see. hope I got the right part here. Oh, yeah. What political status options do you support and why? And this is what Will Castro said. My personal preference is statehood. There are fewer unknown variables. The federal-state relationship is well defined, and risk to human security, food sovereignty, homeland security, stable markets and economy, etc., is easier to mitigate as a state with 2 full-fledged U.S. senators, a representative in Congress, and a working relationship with our federal and international partners. States have international partners. However, now here it goes. However, as a candidate for Congress, my preference takes a back seat to the expressed political will of the qualified voting electorate. I shall faithfully advocate for the status option chosen by, guess who? The Chamorro people. Okay, Will Castro, I'm going to give you your grade, having examined your papers here. Will Castro gets an S, separatist. I've explained too many times that this whole political status boondoggle is nothing but a stalking horse for the independents, for the separatists here on the island. So if that's what you're saying, Will Castro, then what you're saying is you would like to see all this talk about statehood is nice, but it's not what you want to see. You want to see an independent Guam. Then I have Robert Underwood. What political status options do you support? If the 3 options were statehood, independence, and free association, I would vote for free association with U.S. citizenship protections. I'm going to stop there. And Jose, you probably remember in your study of world history that prior to World War I, one of the big swingers in the European continent was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Apparently, Robert has been influenced by his readings of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, because if Guam were in free association with the United States, that means there's a treaty relationship between Guam and the United States, and if people on Guam are citizens of the United States, then we have recreated the Austro-Hungarian Empire, because the independent state of Guam people there would have 2 kinds of citizenship: their Guam citizenship as an independent state and their American citizenship as part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Or we'd be making a treaty for ourselves.
Well, not to mention, I mean, there's something more basic. I think the Austro-Hungarian Empire thing is really interesting for someone who holds himself out as an academic and wants to go to Congress. But free association is a political will of the wisp. Guam is not a sovereign and is not capable of entering any kind of a treaty relationship with the United States, like the 3 island groups that were not part of the United States, that were part of the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, when they negotiated deals with the United States, which are international treaties between 2 sovereign states. Guam is not a sovereign state, so it's incapable of negotiating anything with the United States. In order for Guam to negotiate something with the United States, it would have to be an independent sovereign. So once you jump off that bridge, what you're talking about is independent, not some made-up category called free association, which is impossible. So Robert says, I would vote for free association with the United States U.S. citizenship protections. I believe that other two options have strong appeal but are not realistic in the current political environment. Free association offers the people of Guam a contractual arrangement with the U.S. government that is tailored to the need for flexibility to grow our economy and manage our resources. With the protection of U.S. citizenship, the ties which have grown under the American flag will not be broken, but instead strengthened in new ways. This is really a different form of commonwealth. Well, it's not a form of commonwealth. You know, you might recall that during the Ad administration, we got all excited about commonwealth. Commonwealth, as it was laid out then, is no different than our political status right now. Guam, if the Commonwealth legislation had passed, Guam would still be an unincorporated territory of the United States. But it would have embarked upon the path that I have been advocating. Let's stay in the American empire, and let's do what we can to improve our situation within the American empire, and not chase after a will-o'-the-wisp that's a legal impossibility like free association, or an extremely dangerous path called separation from the United States. And there are lots of things we could do if we ever got over this idea that, well, we've got a commission on self-determination and Chamorros have a right to self-determination. So Robert goes on to say, this is really a different form of commonwealth. Congress has the authority to make the arrangement, and I believe that it is more acceptable to them than either of the other two options. This is just too important a decision to leave on the doorstep of the delegate's office. It is the delegate's responsibility to implement the people's will, no matter what they select. Sounds kind of like Will Castro, doesn't it? So then we have Michael San Nicolas. Robert, I'm going to give you your grade too. A big S. And then Michael San Nicolas. What political status option do you support and why? We must strive for as much socioeconomic independence as possible, but in the context of a closer relationship with the United States. The status quo presents several opportunities and our ability to forego double taxation while also drafting our own constitution and tax code. However, that is contingent upon the people's confidence in the opportunities and our ability to manage such circumstances. Statehood will bring Guam greater U.S. representation, though it has constitutional thresholds to overcome due to population limitations. Greater socioeconomic independence will make us less susceptible to changes in federal funding policy or the prospect of double taxation under statehood. What he means by double taxation under statehood is this. Right now we have a territorial income tax, which is the mirror image of the Internal Revenue Code of federal income tax. So anybody living here pays the same income tax he would pay if he lived in California. The difference is the money all stays here. If Guam were a state, we'd all be paying federal income tax, but the money would be going to Washington. So we'd have to have another tax structure to support our government, which would be a rather sizable tax structure. So that's what Michael means by double taxation. And it's certainly something I think would be, again, statehood as a matter of economics. If Guam were a state, we would have a government of Guam that's like about a tenth the size of what it is now if we had to pay for it ourselves with local tax money. Michael goes on to say, and a status quo or better relationship with the United States will afford us continued protection of the U.S. military from foreign aggression. Is a Guam liaison office in Washington, D.C. necessary? Is the spending justified? Any unclassified position in the government of Guam should be weighed by its return on investment. A liaison position could add value if its role and function has major goals, etc. So Michael says, you know, we got a really good deal right now. And what we ought to do is try to improve on that deal and improve ourselves. And let's stay with the United States. And he makes all of the correct arguments. So I'm going to give Michael his grade. USA. So for me, this is it. You know, everybody else is going to go to D.C. You can expect them to go to D.C. and what the delegate does is pork barrel politics. Okay, it's time for that seventh inning stretch.
Wow, nice smile. So perfect and all.
Thanks. I owe it all to Dr. Robert Yang and his smile team. They do wonders for a healthy, happy mouth.
Got teeth? Don't wait until they hurt. Schedule your routine checkup and cleaning with Dr. Yang and his smile team. Suite 119 in the East West Business Center, Upper Tumon. Call 647-8702 or 3.
The best thing that happened to teeth since toothpaste.
Dr. Yang and his smile team.
They make smiles happen.
Top End Pest Control is who you call for all your pest control needs. Got a problem with roaches, ants, spiders, rodents, fleas, ticks, termites? No problem. They do it all. Top End Pest Control is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business and HubZone certified. Serving Guam since 2012. Call them today for a quote, 487-5657, or email topendpest@gmail.com. Check them out on Facebook at Top End Pest Control and give them a like. Top End Pest Control for all your pest control needs.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties. Doing real estate since 1978. 14 years here on Guam. Call Maria Miller from Horizon Properties at 777-7792.
So here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago, seventh inning stretch, and we catch a plane and come immediately back to the historic studio of The Point in Upper Tumon. And I'm just finishing up here with the Separatists versus Michael San Nicolas. And I've labeled Will Castro and Robert Underwood, the other two candidates for Washington Rep, as separatists, although, you know, everyone who is a separatist doesn't come right out and say it. I'm for an independent Guam. Viva Guam. It's tomorrow's self-determination, etc., and all sorts of euphemisms. But when you scrape the paint and varnish off it, it's clearly an independence, a separatist movement. And if you look at how it's practiced, some real examples of identity politics underlie the separatist movement. So this really helps me decide what I'm going to do here. So I said before the break, as a general principle, what we expect from our Washington delegate is pork barrel politics. Let's see how much money you can bring back to the territory, how many federal programs, construction, etc. That's kind of how we've evaluated our Washington reps in the past. And there was, of course, there was the long quest for war reparations. That's finally over. But I haven't seen, including Will, I haven't seen anyone come out with some really imaginative approaches to the job. As an example, sit down with the covenant between the United States and the Northern Marianas. And there are provisions in that covenant that could be made applicable to Guam. And the argument is there, hey, you did it for them. Why don't you do it for us? There are some good things that probably could be accomplished. We could have a district court judge with life tenure. Puerto Rico has a district court judge with life tenure. And there are other things of a similar nature that could improve our situation. Maybe we could talk a little bit about coastwise shipping. There are other things that could improve our situation within the American empire. But to just say, I'm going to follow the will of the people when we've got this silly Chamorro self-determination commission set up, which really should be named the Chamorro Independence Commission. And then to go off on a tangent like Robert Underwood did, sort of let's try to duplicate the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Okay, maybe I found someone who will agree with some of my statements here. Good afternoon, Ron.
Hey, Havade Sundar, Havade Guam. Yeah, I have to say that I really didn't like the former political status law that Guam had, and I didn't think it was very healthy for our civics or for the people of Guam very much, because it created these artificial divisions. I think that one of the problems that I think that the political status people have is they simply do not use the language of the United Nations. The United Nations uses the terms independence, free association, or integration. And integration can be a lot more than simply statehood. It can be any number of things. It could be things that we might not have imagined yet. And we simply have not considered those things because everyone's fixated on the single channel of statehood when we could talk about things that could actually function and work in a jurisdiction of our size with a population of our size. Well,
Ron, suppose just as a hypothetical case, let's say that we had a plebiscite sanctioned by the national government, and we limited the vote to Chamorros, and every single Chamorro that voted said, I want to keep things just exactly the way they are. This would not be satisfactory to the grievance politicians and the separatist movement. They said, no, that you can't do that because that's not decolonization.
Well, I think the United Nations would recognize that that's an option for Guam, because the other determination that everybody overlooks this in the history of this, and that is one of the other determinations the United Nations made was whatever that jurisdiction is satisfied with. And so if people here are satisfied with status quo and they think that status quo would work the best, then I think the United Nations would accept that, because that's what the will of the people would want. And unfortunately, for some reason, some folks have totally hijacked the entire process, probably for their own devices. I don't know. I think that they like going to the UN and talking like in some kind of stilted diplomatic language, or they like to talk about how oppressed everyone is, or whatever their thing is. I think that it's not a mirror that reflects the reality of our daily life here, and particularly among Chamorro people. And when we talk to real Chamorro people, the majority, and then you look at what's being said at the United Nations, the two simply do not match. They don't link up, and they don't set even very well, unfortunately.
Agreed, Ron.
Yeah,
agreed.
That's just my opinion. But hey, Senator, I always appreciate your show, and I always enjoy listening to you.
Thanks for calling, Rod.
Have a great day, sir.
All right. So, yeah, the word is not, the word is integration. You know, that if there is a satisfactory integration of the colony into the motherland that's acceptable to the people in the colony, that works. It doesn't necessarily have to be statehood. And of course, my own view is this, that the whole thing is a tool of the separatists that want an independent Guam, a Guam that's separate from the United States. So they've set it up in such a manner that the only real choice on the menu is independence. I've explained so many times why statehood is a legal possibility, but a practical impossibility, and that free association is a legal will o' the wisp. It's a classic case of you can't get there from here. So, the better thing to do is start out where we are, try to make it better, and if we have to have a plebiscite, then the plebiscite should include the status that we have, the status that almost everyone seemed to be most satisfied with. How many times did we postpone our so-called plebiscite because we couldn't get enough people to register? We tried all kinds of ways to get people to register, and it just never happened. So, as far as candidates for the U.S. Congress, I can't imagine how we would be served by having Robert Underwood go to the U.S. Congress and say, I think Guam should be an independent country with a treaty relationship with the United States. Then really, well, then why are you in Congress, Robert? Shouldn't you be out in front of the building with a sign picketing?
I'm always curious about this fixation with the United Nations avenue, that trying to convince people here on Guam that United Nations is more of an authority over the United States.
That's right. And the United Nations has no power. It's, as far as I'm concerned, one of the least trustworthy organizations in the world. It has no power. It's corrupt. It engages in all kinds of things that I don't think there is a popular will to support. It's a paper tiger, but to listen to some of the separatist talk, you'd think that all we have to do is approach the United Nations in the proper fashion, and there will be powder blue tanks with a UN, on the front of the tank, cruising down the streets to make sure that Guam has self-determination. It just isn't going to happen. And it's ironic that people like Julian Uggan and some of these other people are running off to all of these tribunals around the world, UNPO and these other things, when we have a representation and perhaps the most esteemed collegial decision-making body in the world. It's called the United States Congress. And if you were to offer a seat in the United States Congress, vote or no vote, to just about any other small island in the world, they would snap it up in a heartbeat. But anyhow, that's where we are. So at least I know that there's one person who wants to go to Washington for what I think are the right reasons. Okay, moving on to next item on the card, which is Jama Matglotnya versus the people of Guam. And this is kind of interesting. Oh, by the way, I remember there's something else I wanted to mention about Robert here. Back in August, there was a story where Underwood began by saying that he's for Chamorro self-determination and has always been since the very beginning. There's two dimensions to this for me. One is there's a legal dimension, and that is that legally the people have the right to determine their future, and this was granted through a series of laws and primarily by the Treaty of Paris, which is just dead wrong. The Treaty of Paris, Article 9, the civil rights and political status of the native inhabitants of the territories hereby ceded to the United States shall be determined by the Congress. So, Robert, you want to go to Congress and you don't even know what the Treaty of Paris says, but you're willing to flaunt your knowledge? And then he goes on to say, and in a sense, the Organic Act also acknowledged that it is the Chamorro people for whom the political status of Guam is really attached to. He's making it up as he goes along. And you can see that moral obligation when people start talking about their status as an indigenous people is also a key driving force. So there's two dimensions to Chamorro self-determination. There's the moral imperative, and there's a legal standing issue, and how that is defined or accepted or refined by each individual human being, by each Chamorro and non-Chamorro on Guam, is vitally important for understanding the history of Guam. I think maybe Guam would be a good place for Robert to stay, not Washington. Okay, next item on the card, Jama Manglonia versus the people of Guam. A central figure in the island's fight against Wuhan virus retired on Friday. Okay, our Carl back again for another ride on the Ferris wheel. Let's take him down the home stretch, okay?
If you've ever struggled for breath, you know with emphysema, COPD, lung cancer, or another respiratory illness, the right medical treatment makes all the difference. GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic has the latest technology and respiratory equipment, staffed by world-class pulmonologists. Make an appointment today with GRMC's Pulmonology Clinic and start breathing easier. GRMC, where patients are partners.
The last day to respond to the 2020 Census of Guam is fast approaching. Respond by September 30, 2020 to help our island receive the federal funding it needs for essential services. We only receive this chance every 10 years. Don't get left out of the count. Contact the call center at 645-2020 to complete your interview today. Together, we can make a difference.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific. Banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are, heading down the home stretch, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. And as the finale of the show, I'm bringing into the paddock for this final ride the most dangerous man in the room. That's your cue, R. Carl.
Good afternoon again, Bob. Thanks for the second ride on the Ferris wheel. Well, before I comment briefly about why I originally called, I just wanted to comment also about self-determination. In my view, we did self-determine. We had a representative form of government. Our representative got feedback from island residents and took their wishes to Washington, D.C., and they did their best to realize what they felt were the wishes of the people. They didn't do that in a vacuum or in a bubble. And the proof is that as our political status evolved with the United States, there were no mass protests. There was no, I see no evidence of it in our history of people getting angry and, having these massive protests. Oh, we don't want to get closer to the United States. We want independence. We want to be like the Philippines.
Well, not yet, anyhow, Carl.
Yeah. Yeah, until later on. Ironically, after the war generation starts to die off, like my mom and her siblings and that whole generation, yeah, that's an irony. Anyway, I wanted to also comment about a few articles I've seen. I'm sure you've seen them, and I just want to point out the irony that Palau has actually opened the doorway to the United States to build a base on Palau. So we have a contingent of people here trying to, with a long-term objective of driving the American military out of the island. No matter what they say, that is the long-term objective. You hear the same anti-capitalism, anti-America, anti-military rhetoric.
Environmental wackos.
Identical stuff we're hearing on the campuses and in the streets of America today. All this hate America rhetoric, it's absolutely identical. So no matter what anyone says, the long-term objective is separate from America and then make conditions here so hard for the American military to stay that they have no choice but to just pull out. Set a super high lease amount and just make conditions as hard as possible.
Wait a minute, Carl. You mentioned lease. What do you mean by lease?
Well, what I've heard is, that one of the separatists I talked to some time ago just said, well, we can just lease it for that base for the base areas for like $10 billion. That's money we're just giving away.
So this would be an independent Guam. Is that correct?
I think that's the utopian vision. Yeah, pretty much.
So the United States has fee title to both Anderson and Naval Station. The absolute ownership as a matter of local civilian law. Plus, the United States has sovereign authority over those two places. So the independent, the People's Republic of Guam then says, okay, we want you guys to pay $10 billion a year for that real property. And the United States says, no, we're not going to pay you anything for it at all. What happens next?
That's a good question. I have a feeling the objective is just to drive them out, off the island.
Well, that wouldn't do it. I think it would be very difficult in a situation like that if Guam were independent to have any leverage over the military whatsoever.
Well, that's the utopian vision I've heard from.
And that's exactly why it's utopian, and that's why people should abandon this idea that, well, if Guam were independent, we could charge a lot of money to lease the bases. First thing is the United States doesn't lease bases from anyone. It enters into treaties with countries to provide mutual assistance, but they don't lease it like you'd lease an apartment. And second, if you examine the bargaining power of the United States versus Foreign Minister Bavakwa representing the People's Republic of Guam, I think there's something of a disparity of bargaining power there. But I hear what you're saying, Carl. I just think that we're talking pipe dreams here as opposed to reality.
Yeah, and I agree. But I just wanted to point out that irony of Palau, which I'm not sure exactly what their political status is in relation to the United States, but they're actually, they've experienced China playing hardball. China tried to force them to stop recognizing Taiwan, and when the Palauan government refused, they said, no, take a hike, we're not going to do that. They just shut off all Chinese tourism, just cut them off at the knees. So they understand that the Chinese Communist Party plays hardball. There are all kinds of smiles, at these events, and oh yeah, we're in this together. We're going to build your prosperity. We'll lease you billions of dollars, and when you can't pay, we'll work something else out.
You know,
100 years
international geopolitics is not a game for the faint at heart, and especially with a resurgent China trying to reestablish its position in the world. So if there were an independent People's Republic of Guahan, the Chinese government would not go through a thought process where they said, well, we want to give Guam a really good deal because we have so much respect for the Chamorro culture. That would not come into it at all. It would be strictly what benefits China, and it wouldn't care at all about what happens here. Take a look at the Northern Marianas as a very good example.
Yeah, they've allocated over $1 trillion. I don't know where it stands now, but at one point it was over $1 trillion to their One Belt, One Road initiative, and they've, that's led to them having a presence in over 70 countries. And some of these countries, they've enticed these poorer countries to partake in these massive, billion-dollar loans. And then when they can't pay, they just use these agreements as leverage and say, well, give us a 100-year lease on this strategic property. They're very, very wily. These are not stupid people. And the Palauan government officials know this. They have woke up and they realize that they're on the menu for China. They know. That's why they're inviting America to, come on in, build a base here. We want you. If anybody else doesn't want you, we want you here. Those guys, they're licking their chops looking at us, and we don't like that. Anyway, thanks, Bob, for allowing me to chime in about that. I appreciate it.
Okay, Carl. So you helped me getting down the home stretch here. I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so let's see. I got about 3 more minutes here on Tall Tales. I was going to start out with Jama Manglotnia versus the people of Guam, but I wouldn't be able to finish it, so I think I'll save that until tomorrow and just cruise through Facebook comments here and see what the tailgaters are talking about today. Let's see. Let's see, Pam Duvall, breaking news. 80 public health and social and Secret Service employees furloughed. That's from Pam Duvall. That's what she posted.
I think what I've seen is there's a threat to furlough DPHSS employees because of the overruled veto. Overridden, yeah.
Yeah, and Tina has sent a letter out saying that the reason that she didn't go with the override was because she didn't want to see those 80 people laid off.
There's a really great response from Senator Therese Terlahi on that, and I think it's a great topic or so people to read up on that.
Yeah, I might bring that up tomorrow. So Ken Brown says, what? Where? Pam Duvall. Lulu Bell Ding Dong Executive Orders. Pam Duvall, Candid News Group, just moments ago. So Candid News Group kind of stays on top of a lot of these things, unlike some of the mainstream media. I guess we'd have to have Anumita Carr write about it before we really knew what was going on.
Canada News doesn't wait for the AG's opinion before they publish.
That's right. Okay, then I've got Randy, let's see, I've got another thread here. Denise Legaspi, did you see Pennsylvania courts declaring the lockdown unconstitutional? Jose Martinez says, listen to the beginning of the program when they, when this live feed posts. Denise Legaspi, sorry, I fell asleep and just woke up. Oh, you miss a little, you miss a lot, right? Okay, well, hello, Denise. Okay, so here we are, the grand finale of Tall Tales. We'll be back again tomorrow. More Tall Tales. See you then.
A narrow strip of land at the mouth of Mobile Bay. They're reporting sand and seawater already covering some of the roadways. Most of the locals, including Sharon Dixon, leaving.
I'm not going to hang around if it's coming right to us.
Not expected to make landfall until late tonight or early Wednesday. Sally could soon spawn